Greetings, my relatives. My name is Dr. Johnny Gonzalez Chavez III. I am Tigua from Tortugas Pueblo in Las Cruces, New Mexico. In this series, I have one goal, and that is to tell the truth, simply, directly, and honestly, not assign guilt, but to confront reality, because we cannot fix what we refuse to face. Before we begin, I want to make one thing clear. I do not speak for the sovereign nations of Turtle Island, nor do I represent any one nation in this series. I stand as one voice for those whose suffering, silence, and survival have too often been ignored. This series is not about attacking America. It is about confronting the distance between what America says it is and what Native people have lived. Welcome to Episode 3, The Legal Architect. To understand how broken promises became permanent, we have to move from philosophy into law. Ideas can justify exclusion, but laws make exclusion enforceable. Laws decide who owns land, who holds power, who is recognized, and who is pushed aside. What began as theory in the early formation of the United States became a legal structure that would define the relationship between indigenous nations and the federal government for generations. This is not just history, it is the foundation of systems that still operate today. One of the most important pieces of this structure is known as the Marshall Trilogy, a series of Supreme Court decisions from the early 1800s led by Chief Justice John Marshall. These cases, Johnson versus Mintosh, Cherokee Nation versus Georgia, and Worcester versus Georgia, did more than resolve legal disputes. They created the legal framework that would define Native nations inside the United States. In Johnson versus Mintosh, the court ruled that indigenous peoples had the right to occupy their land, but not full ownership in the way European settlers defined it. According to the court, ultimate title belonged to the federal government. This decision was rooted in the Doctrine of Discovery, a colonial idea that allowed Christian European nations to claim lands inhabited by non-Christian peoples. What began as a European justification for conquest became embedded in American law. In Cherokee Nation versus Georgia, the court introduced a phrase that still shapes federal Indian law today: domestic dependent nations. This designation placed Native nations in a position that was neither fully foreign nor fully independent. Tribes were recognized as political communities, but they were also placed under federal authority. In other words, Native nations were acknowledged, but their power was constrained by a system they did not create. Then, in Worcester versus Georgia, the court recognized that state governments did not have authority over tribal lands. On paper, this was one of the strongest early statements supporting tribal sovereignty. It affirmed that tribes were distinct political communities with their own authority, but recognition without enforcement became another kind of broken promise. Even when the court acknowledged native sovereignty, the broader system still placed ultimate power in the hands of the federal government. Taken together, these three cases created a legal structure that both recognized and limited indigenous sovereignty at the same time. That is what makes this system so complicated. It was not built on simple denial, it was built on partial recognition. Rights were acknowledged but restricted. Sovereignty was recognized but contained. Native nations were treated as real governments, but only within boundaries defined by another government. This pattern reflects the same contradiction we have been examining throughout this series: inclusion on limited terms, controlled by those who hold the power to define the system. Understanding this legal foundation matters because it explains how displacement became normalized. When land ownership is redefined, when sovereignty is reclassified, and when authority is centralized, the results are no longer presented as injustice. They are presented as law, and that law did not disappear. Its influence is still visible today in debates over tribal sovereignty, land rights, jurisdiction, natural resources, federal recognition, and the authority of Native nations to govern their own people. Many modern conflicts trace back to these early legal decisions. The language may have changed, the courtrooms may look different, but the structure still carries the weight of those original rulings. This is why the phrase broken promises is not only historical, it is ongoing. The legal architecture built during the early years of the United States did not resolve the relationship between Native nations and the federal government. It defined that relationship in a way that continues to create tension, limitation, and inequality. So the question moving forward is not only whether the system was fair, the deeper question is this: how can a structure built on partial recognition ever produce full equity? Because once ideas are written into law, they do not simply disappear. They endure. They shape policy. They shape courts. They shape land. They shape families. They shape the future. And once the law redefined Native nations, the next step became even more personal. The system moved from land to identity, from treaties to children, from legal control to cultural erasure. Because if a government can limit a nation's sovereignty, it may eventually try to control the future of that nation itself. In the next episode, we confront one of the most painful tools of that effort: the Indian boarding school system.